Anyway, just don't eat ice cream while dieting, pussy boy. That's so stupid. Why? I like ice cream and it actually fits my fucking macros. It's a really bad dieting advice. If I love ice cream and I want to eat ice cream, then you know, doing so in the healthiest way possible or doing so in a way that like fits my macros is absolutely the right thing to do. All right, let's keep going.
My fellow Americans,
this is 7 minutes long, dude. President Carl Higbee gives the address of the blame game Biden should have regarding Afghanistan. If you're sitting there in the safe view of America complaining about my tone, I guarantee you'd be thinking very, very differently if you were the ones under heavy gunfire. What? I can't watch a 7-minute Newsmax video, man. Okay, let's watch.
Declared it wants peaceful relations with other countries in its first news conference since taking control.
Taliban did a news conference, boys.
The group has been keen to show a new face to the world, pledging inclusion and education for women and religious tolerance. The group insists it will offer amnesty to anyone who works with
religious tolerance,
the government or foreign forces. But reports of Taliban rule in cities captured during the group's advance have raised fears about these promises.
We have pardoned anyone, all those who had fought against us. We don't want a repeat of war. We want to do away with the factors of conflict. So the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan does not have any conflict with anybody. We want the fighting to end. The Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan is committed to the rights of women within the framework of Sharia. Our women have the same rights. They can work in different sectors on the basis of our rules and regulations, in education and health and other areas. They are going to be working shoulder to shoulder with us. We want to assure the international community there will be no discrimination against women, but of course within our religious framework.
Well, let's go live now.
You should just be like, we're going to be like Saudi Arabia and then move on. You know what I mean? Like, except they don't have nukes. Or well, Pakistan is what I was thinking when I said that. Except they're not, you know, a important asset or an ally to the United States yet. I've talked about my suspicions and what my speculation is many times over the past couple of days, but I do think that the reason for why the United States did this, once again, is because it was inevitable. It could have happened now. It could have happened 10 years down the line. It could have happened 20 years down the line. It doesn't fucking matter. It was inevitable that it was going to happen, that the Taliban was going to overtake because they were too fucking powerful. So what I suspect is that they probably were like, here, we'll give you stability. You give us mining contracts and don't give it to China, even though the Taliban have met with China as well. So we'll see what happens.
To Kabul, where we can speak with our correspondent Rob McBride. Rob, you were watching that news conference start to finish. How would you summarise it?
I think it was as we expected. You know, we've seen it's not quite a charm offensive, but you know, after all of the military offensive of the recent weeks, it is certainly the Taliban trying to reassure the international community and also Afghans themselves that this is going to be a different type of regime, a different type of government, a softer side, if you like, more respectful and inclusive. All of these key words we've tended to hear in the last week or two. And now we hear it in this first official news conference. It is very important. This is almost like the keynote address, I guess, for this new government. It's been long anticipated. It was meant to take place. We heard talk that it could have taken place yesterday, Monday. It got delayed, and now we have it. So this is important. Interestingly, right at the end there, we have heard that this will become...
All bullshit is leading up to the U.S. withdrawing this year. The Taliban went back to bomb Afghan civilians left and right. Yeah.
Seems a regular feature. There will be news conferences on a regular basis moving forward, rather like But
before they didn't have, but it wasn't their government, and now it is.
kind of international community, the Western liberal sort of countries that it seems this news conference was aimed at. You did get the sense that although we were addressing issues that are very important here in Afghanistan, and to all the Afghan journalists who were there in this news conference,
what a weird situation. Those are literally murderers and head choppers we're watching here. Dude, what are you talking about? Like, of course, that's how this works, dude. What, you think when like a member of fucking Congress gives a speech in the United States of America, if they're like a fucking veteran that toured, like, you think they haven't murdered people? Like, are you crazy? It's literally like, from the point of view of the fucking Pashtun, that's the same shit. Do you understand that? Like, I'm not assigning a morality to it. You're basically describing every government, though. You know what I mean? Yeah, you never say that when we're showing U.S. troops, though. I mean, that's a stretch, dude. Why is that a stretch? How is that a stretch? The main difference between this fucking dude and, like, I don't know, a Western version of this dude is that the Western version of this dude is probably, one, not as brutal, okay, let's be real, and two, not as, like, religious. Even if they are religious, they're not, they're nowhere near as, like, lost in the sauce as a fucking fundamentalist, like Wahhabist dude like this, okay? That's the main difference. What do you think, like, when America sends fucking troops over to Afghanistan, they're sending them over there to play patty cakes? Is that what you think our troops are doing out there? Like, what do you think veterans do? Why do you think they're so fucked up when they come back, dude? Why? Because they're like, oh man, I lost a game of tic-tac-toe, dude. It was so fucked up. No, they do the same shit. They fucking murder.
Was very mindful of what the world watching would think about this new government. And the Taliban comes into power here really with something of a hill to climb. You have a very skeptical international audience looking at this organization, given all of the history that we know about going back 20 years. It has unexpectedly, in many respects, suddenly found itself inheriting this country. And
Did you know that Mullah Omar hung a warlord on a tank gun barrel for sexually assaulting children and chopped the heads off of warlords in order to stop the sale of opium? Okay, but then Mullah Omar is also, like, fucking totally fine with 12-year-old and 14-year-old girls getting fucking raped and being sold off to families for marriages. You know what I mean? It's not like I'm not gonna sit here and be like, that's a good guy. He's not a good guy. None of these dudes are good guys. Okay, that's crazy.
There is an extreme skepticism from the international community about the way the Taliban conducted itself, for example, during these negotiations, that as part of the agreement, as part of the process, it was meant to enter into.
Just like how you have to say you don't like the Taliban so often because it shows you understand. Someone could assume you are pro-Taliban. Yeah, no, I know, because Americans are conditioned through a healthy fucking diet of, like, pro-imperialist propaganda, which is the exclusive fucking position that mainstream media takes, to assume that, like, anyone who fucking turns around and, like, ever goes against that narrative unconditionally, it says, no, that's fucking bullshit, is seen as an enemy combatant. I'm doing, like, fucking, you know, fifth column shit here, you know? I'm like a secret Islamic operative amongst the ranks, and I'm actually, you know, with the enemy. It's just the reality, unfortunately. That's how people are conditioned into thinking and feeling. So that's precisely why I have to constantly fucking, you know, repeat myself.
negotiations with the what is now the defunct government that has just collapsed. But it was meant to negotiate with that government, and there is skepticism that it was playing for time, that it was acting in bad faith. All of those things, obviously, which the Taliban denies, and it blames the other side. It blames.
You were born in New Jersey, bro. Law. I know, but explain that to a fucking dumbass. You know. And also, you can be fucking fifth column and be born behind enemy lines, you know, or within our ranks or whatever.
The outgoing government for acting in bad faith and for bringing about the crisis that resulted in its downcoming. So all of this did seem to be aimed at trying to convince the overseas audience. And you got a lot of that. And it did address some of those issues, particularly that the international community is concerned about. One thing we didn't mention earlier was that the fact that never again would allow Afghanistan land or soil to be used for the training of groups of fighters who would threaten those countries overseas. That was one of the big concerns that obviously led to the intervention of 20 years ago. So there was that guarantee. Then specifically, there was the guarantee in answer to one of the questions to the people who are just a kilometre or two away from here, clamouring to get into the international airport. And as we were listening to the news conference, we hear occasionally gunshots ring out, sometimes the odd single shot, sometimes automatic gunfire as Taliban guards and fighters who have a cordon around the terminal try to keep people back. It is a reminder it gives you the context of what's happening here. But there was the assurance for all of those people that there is no need to run, that there is a guarantee that there will not be.
Do you believe the Taliban have a more valid cause than many conservatives of the West? What? No, dude. They're fucking psychos. No, their cause is bullshit, dude. What the fuck? The people that say yes are annoying, delusional internet, anti-imperialists that like literally are just anti-America, and they think that that's like they think that that is like the proper position to take in every single instance, and they're not even relevant enough to fucking address. And what I mean by that is like they are oftentimes correct like 90% of the time, because like being anti-America, America being the hegemonic power, okay, lands you in the correct position more often than not, like in the overwhelming majority of cases. But then there are fucking instances like the Taliban, and you're like, I'm anti-America, so I'm pro-Taliban. You're like fucking psychotic, dude. No, dude, I don't think a bunch of goddamn like psychopaths who only know how to fucking shoot AK-47s and have been reading the fucking Quran or whatever and don't even know what it actually says in the Quran in a bastardized interpretation from a fucking Pakistani madrasa, and then like they move over and live in a fucking cave their entire lives, like shooting at American soldiers, are going to have the best possible way of governing an entire multi-ethnic, incredibly complex fucking region. Okay, that's a psychotic approach. Like, think about it. There's a lot of conservative values in the Middle East to begin with. These guys are like, holy shit, they are more conservative than the other fucking dudes who are already pretty goddamn conservative. Hankies don't support the Taliban, chat? No, it's like fucking the Brazilian Trotskyites or some shit. And like one Italian Marxist-Leninist group said that they were offering support to the Taliban. It doesn't really matter. It's like completely insignificant.
Reprisals or grudges or a knock on the door or interrogations, as they put it. The people who are there can go home. There will not be any recriminations. It remains to be seen whether the people who are in fear this Tuesday evening that they are going to be targeted, whether they will believe that or not. But certainly that was the message that the Taliban wanted to get across with this news conference.
OK, Rob McBride there reporting live for us from Kabul. Rob, thank you. The head of the Taliban's political office in Qatar's capital, Doha, is heading back to Afghanistan. Mullah Abdul Ghani Baradar led the group's negotiations in peace talks with the US and Afghan governments. He departed after meeting Qatar's foreign minister earlier today. Talks between the Taliban and former Afghan officials will now be held domestically instead of in Doha. Let's bring in Haroon Rahimi. He's the an assistant professor of law at the American University of Afghanistan and joins us by Skype from Istanbul. It's good to have you with us again. It's quite significant, is it not, that Mullah Abdul Ghani Baradar is heading back to Afghanistan. Does this give any indication, do you think, of who's going to be making up the government, what kind of government we're going to see, especially now that the top people are basing themselves in the capital of the country they have just seized?
So let's just be clear that he's not the top person in the Taliban movement, Mullah Baradar. He's been the head of the political office in Doha, but they have a system of leadership where the leadership council is at the head. And Mullah Baradar has generally been acting as the face, the political office. You can compare him to kind of a Ministry of Foreign Affairs in a sense. But the head of the military committee and the head of the leadership committee are two different people. In terms of what kind of government we can expect now, given the developments we've observed so far, I had hoped, and the hope had been, that there will be an interim government that is neutral. That hope was lost when Ghani escaped.
We have a very Orientalist perception of Pakistan. It's actually a very diverse and heterogeneous country. Some areas are exploited by extremists for political gain, but it's not the Taliban land you have painted as. You should visit one day. No, I don't think that it's Taliban land at all. So I apologize if that's how it came across. But when you talk about like the ISI or the Pakistani intelligence service, the Pakistani intelligence service operates in collaboration, in coordination with the CIA, and are literally funding the same kind of extremist militants all the goddamn time. So that's unfortunately the truth. It's unfortunately the fucking reality of the circumstance. So to avoid that reality would be delusional. To not mention that would be delusional.
Escaped Kabul, and Taliban said that they had to step in to fill the vacuum. They could not just wait until an interim government, and they could not wait for an interim government to take over from Ghani, and then a new government will be formed under the supervision of an interim government. That is not the case. Now Taliban are, for all intents and purposes, in charge, and they will be controlling the process through which a new government will be formed. This means that we will be having a Taliban-controlled process through which an inclusive government will be formed. Taliban are pretty much holding all cards. There are two considerations that may kind of point towards.
My take is a radical one and a brutal one. To be honest, in my opinion, we should leave Afghanistan alone, and everyone who wants to come with us should or flee should stay. Make them fight for it. Dude, I burned your house, okay? And then when you opened up your hands and you said, please help me, I literally lit more fucking fires in your house. And if you don't want to burn alive in your house that I've literally burned, then you're a fucking coward. It's easy for you to say Gaming Crusader 69, dude. Your own personal Karengal Valley, like I have repeated time and time again, is when mommy makes her hot pocky and the fucking middle part is cold. So shut the fuck up.
A more inclusive system. One is international legitimacy. It is something that is important to the Taliban. It is one of the things they care about. They care about many things that some often may come in tension with their desire to have international legitimacy. We'll have to see how trade-offs will work out. The second issue, the consideration that may point towards possible more inclusive government, even despite the fact that Taliban will control the process of creating the government, is their desire to have domestic legitimacy. You have to realize that the Taliban are not a popular movement. They are becoming more popular. I believe they are, given that they are maintaining law and order and they are saying some of the right things. But it's still a large part of the population is incredibly skeptical of them, distrusting, fears reprisal, and remembers the context through which they conducted brutal war, killed civilians, and conducted many sort of crimes and against the population. So you have a very unconvinced population, and they will, if they have foresight, they will care to have the different constituencies of Afghanistan represented in the government to gain domestic legitimacy. If they fail to do that, form an inclusive government that would ensure international domestic legitimacy, then I'm afraid that we will have a resistance forming against them. The same way when in Born 1, Taliban were executed when the 2001, the new system was formed after the Taliban were toppled.
How would you like it if we bombed your house? Like if a foreign country was like, we're going to bomb your house because there's like, you know, there's some politicians living near your neighborhood. Do you think that would be good? 4 million people live in Kabul, you fucking psycho. Like civilians. Please. Like, do I have to fucking slap empathy into you? Like, is it that hard for you to comprehend? Like literally bombing New York City, dude.
We saw the Taliban insurgency kind of re-emerging, Taliban emerging as an insurgency. Now there are hints that there will be an insurgency formed. I mean, the former VP claimed that he's the head of, still the caretaker of the government. There are hints. I mean, Panjshir still is not has not surrendered to the Taliban, and some military reported. There are rumors that some military assets were moved there. So I mean, and those are still on hold. And it's going to depend on whether the Taliban will be able to bring in their oppositions into the government to neutralize any, preempt any possibility of resistance becoming popular. Even, I mean, some people may still call it resistance, but how inclusive the government will be is going to determine how popular the resistance will be. And international legitimacy is also important because it's going to determine who's willing to possibly help resistance or not.
Okay, very notable there. Lots of focus in that presser on trying to get people to stay in the country, to prevent a brain drain, to rebuild the nation. We'll just have to wait and see if the people of Afghanistan will heed that call. For now, Haroon Rahimi, great to get your analysis and your thoughts. Thank you very much. Indeed. Now, the NATO Secretary-General has called on the Taliban to facilitate the departure of all those who want to leave the country. Jens Stoltenberg also blamed the Afghan forces for what's happening in Kabul right now.
The Afghan political leadership failed to stand up to the Taliban and to achieve the peaceful solution that Afghans desperately wanted.
Desperately.
This failure of Afghan leadership led to the tragedy we are witnessing today.
Turkey and Greece fear being at the forefront of another refugee crisis as thousands of Afghans look to flee Taliban rule. Turkey's already building a wall along its border with Iran to stop people crossing illegally, while Greece has said it cannot become a gateway into the EU for Afghans. Greece was on the front line of...
Thank God Macron had a fucking spicy take on this, saying that we will not allow a surge of Afghan migrants to come in.
Europe's migration crisis in 2015, where nearly 1 million people fleeing conflicts in Syria, Iraq and Afghanistan landed on its islands. The EU is calling for Europe to create humanitarian corridors for Afghan refugees. Jonah Hull reports from London.
For the moment, of course, the focus is on...
Bro, look, this is the most London fucking photo, dude. You didn't even need to put London up there, dude. Look at this. I mean, obviously, it's London behind him with, like, notable, the fucking Ferris wheel and shit. But, like, look at how rainy and gray it is, dude.
Getting foreign nationals out of Afghanistan, along with Afghan support staff. Some countries in Europe are going further. The Germans are adding human rights activists, lawyers, other people deemed to be at risk from the Taliban to their list of evacuees. The British government is later due to announce details of an emergency resettlement scheme for those most in need, focused its thought on women and girls in Afghanistan. But not all countries are going to be quite so willing and eager to help. The Greeks have already said this morning they are not willing, again, to be a gateway country for refugees making their way from Turkey across the water and into Europe. Austria, for instance, as we speak, is still continuing with deportation plans for failed Afghan asylum seekers back to Afghanistan as a means of deterrence for new arrivals, and doing so with the support of 90% of the Austrian public. So it's all very well for people like the French President Emmanuel Macron to stand up as he did on Monday and call for a joined-up European approach to ensure the safe passage of people coming if they want to come. But this is an incredibly thorny issue in Europe. It's led to the downfall of governments in recent years. It's spawned right-wing movements in almost every country. Governments, I think, will certainly be on their guard, if not all of them actively preparing to accommodate what may soon be coming their way.
There are huge parts of Afghanistan where the Taliban enjoy support from certain ethnic groups. The Torkham border crossing with Pakistan is one such place. It has now reopened, and there's no rush of people trying to flee, as Kamal Haider explains.
The main border crossing between Afghanistan and Pakistan at Torkham is now open for business. Trucks have been traveling in both directions. There were apprehensions that as the Taliban advance across the country, tens of thousands of refugees will pour across this border into Pakistan. But the ground reality is very different. People living close to the Pakistani border, all the way from Helmand province to Nuristan up in the north, are mostly Pushtun tribes. They, of course, welcome the Taliban. They have seen the Taliban rule in the past. And what we saw at this border crossing, that instead of tens of thousands of Afghans coming across the border, we saw hundreds of Afghans eager to cross that border and go back to their country. Most of the people that we spoke to over here are elated and jubilant with the fact that the Taliban are back in power. They, on the other hand, do not agree with the international community, and they see a ray of hope for a lasting Afghan settlement.
We welcome the Taliban back in Afghanistan, as they are the true heroes of the country, and none other than them can bring a lasting peace to this war-torn country destroyed by many.
Afghanistan is in ruins from the last 40 years. Firstly, we were made homeless by Russians and then the Americans, but thank God, finally we've got freedom from their invasions. We trust the Taliban and hope they will bring peace, stability and progress to this country.
But while the situation on the borders was now returning back to normal, there were frantic diplomatic efforts to try to put the Afghan leaders on the same table with the Taliban. The former foreign minister...
That dude is so white, though. Yeah, dude. There are, like, super fucking white Afghan people. I didn't know. I don't know if you knew that or not, but yeah.
Of Afghanistan.
It's an incredibly diverse, multi-ethnic fucking environment, dude.
Salahuddin Rabbani is in Pakistan, along with Yunus Qanuni, the head of the Afghan parliament, and also Ustad Mohaqiq is amongst that group. He represents the minority Hazara community. What Pakistan has been telling the Afghan Taliban is that there should be an inclusive government, which should include all the ethnic groups of Afghanistan. Therefore, it offers a ray of hope for the first time in 2 decades for a lasting peaceful settlement to the Afghan conflict. What the Pakistanis have been saying to the Taliban is that it has to be an inclusive government. The Taliban have also announced an amnesty and said that there will be no retribution even for those people who've been working with the Americans.
Well, girls in the western Afghan city of Herat have attended school just days after the Taliban takeover. The armed group says it will ensure inclusiveness for women despite its strict guidelines on how they should dress. The United Nations is urging the Taliban to keep its promises.
One white guy equals multi-ethnic? You think there's only one white Afghani, dude? Like, there's only one white guy in Afghanistan? Like... Or if you don't know what you're talking about, like northern Afghanistan and southern Afghanistan are like entirely different countries. I wish like I wish you at least knew like what you were talking about. You just half the time chatters are just like talking shit without any fucking prior knowledge. There's that famous girl with the green eyes, the photo. I'm sure you guys have seen it. Anyway. What is this next time you see someone? Wait, what is...
eyes after they...
Wait, what? Yeah, I remember this. Oh, this is a very famous fucking video. I mean, this is a really old video. Where was this from? I was seeing if there was TOS.
After they caught a group of Iraqis stealing wood.
And this is in Iraq.
We try to stop them from looting, they don't understand, so we'll take their car and we'll crush it. United States Army, tankers, Hool.
What was this on? Hua, baby.
That's what you get when you loot.
So. And that's not like a singular instance for the record. You know, that's not like you know, they're just blowing off some steam after a long fucking day of, you know, causing fucking terror in a goddamn region.
Later, the car's owner told us, I'm a taxi driver. The car was my livelihood.
You know? Yeah, the ones that didn't get fucking blown to bits, these dipshits. Some, by the way, I have no respect for these people. I'm sorry. Like, this is why I don't have any respect for like veterans unconditionally. Okay, they have to demonstrate why they are deserving of respect. There's no unconditional respect that comes with service here. Okay. Wait, hold on. I'm waiting on. Oh, perfect. Okay. I got two people in here that I'm going to bring on now. Two people from, it's Bilal and also Ashraf from Afghans for a Better Tomorrow. They're progressive Afghans that I'm going to talk to, because yesterday we talked to a vet, and today I'm going to talk to, you know, actual Afghan people from a progressive organization to hear what their you know, to hear what their experiences are like. Why are you breeding so much hate for America? I mean, if you watch footage of American imperialism and it fucking fills you with rage because this is what's happening on the fucking ground, then perhaps you shouldn't be upset about me like showing you the footage, and be a little bit more upset about how hateful and hate-ridden these actions are. Like, if you're more concerned with me showing you what we are doing rather than the actions itself and its consequences, then you're not a good person. I'm gonna, of course, run a ad break before I do that. Okay. So it's top of the hour. Every hour it's time for a 6-second ad break. No segue here. I'm in too much pain right now. My back is like completely getting worse every fucking moment. I hate this shit so much. I fucked it up again. I'm so mad. Yeah, if you no longer want to see the ads, if you want an ad-free broadcasting experience, all you need to do is subscribe. You can subscribe for $5 or for free with a Twitch Prime. Okay, we're going to have a short, 30-minute interview with these guys. Twitch Prime is free. You can use an ad blocker or a VPN. Fuck, I'm out of it right now. But here's the 1-minute ad break now. Okay. And without further ado, I'm going to give him a fucking call right here. Okay. VPN. I'm out of it right now. Hello? Right now. Okay, you guys are super low. Hold on. Super low volume. Do you have cameras?
I'm putting mine in.
Okay.
All right. Yeah. Give me 1 second.
Okay. I'm gonna wait real quick. I'm gonna do the. All right, perfect. Oh wait, your camera is like it turned on and then off for 1 second. It was on, then it was off.
How about now?
Oh, it's perfect now. It's both of you guys are good. Okay. Hold on. Let me just frame you guys up real quick, Doing a little bit of live production here.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you guys perfectly now, by the way. You're perfect. You're coming super clear.
Awesome.
All right, ladies and gentlemen. Here they are. I wanted to offer a perspective from the actual people impacted by American imperialism, the endless American imperialism in Afghanistan, and to offer you a different perspective of progressive folks. Here is Bilal and Ashraf from the organization Afghans for a Better Tomorrow. What's going on, guys? Shouts out to Jordan for linking me up with you guys.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here, man. Thanks for having us on and allowing us to talk about what's going on back home.
All right. So where are you guys at right now? You're in America, I assume.
I'm a former resident of DC, unfortunately, but I live in LA now.
Oh, that's terrible. I mean, LA's good, but DC's terrible.
Yeah, I'm sorry, man.
Okay. You're muted, by the way. Not you, Ashraf. You are.
Hey, sorry about that.
Yeah, you're unmuted now. Okay. What about you, man?
Thank you. I love DC. It's home to good people outside of the federal area. But I'm in the East Coast, been working in the DC kind of immigration and refugee advocacy world for a few years. I'm really thankful to you, Hasan, for having us on.
Yeah, no problem. All right. So let's talk about it. You guys still have family back in Afghanistan, I assume? Where are they at? Are they in Kabul or?
Yeah.
Right.
Have you? I hope they're all right. Have you been talking to them? What's the situation like for them on the ground?
Yeah, I'm talking to some folks. I mean, they're as safe as can be, I guess, as safe as one can hope for. The same is not true for a lot of folks in our community and a lot of my friends and a lot of my extended family. People have just a lot of extended family back home. But I think what's impacting what they're coming to terms with or trying to realize or trying to figure out, I guess, right now is what kind of authoritarian and repressive rule they have to deal with.
Yeah. So I'm getting reports, I mean, conflicting reports for that matter, but at least reports from, Democracy Now! That like there is a little bit more stability now in Kabul as well as other places with respect to like, Taliban coming in and taking over and basically just functionally becoming the new Afghan government versus mainstream media that is definitely a little bit more hysterical about what's going on. I mean, it is definitely a horrible situation where there are people literally getting trying to hang on to airplanes and whatnot to try to escape the country. So I wanted to hear what the genuine fears are of the people that are there in Kabul right now. Before we get started on some other stuff.
I would say, the absence of violence is instability. It's, oppression and tyranny are not stability. People are staying inside now. They're not taking to the streets for the most part. Although I saw just today video of Afghan women demonstrating outside of government offices saying, "We want our rights. We don't want you to take away our rights. We want our rights that are granted to us." In their own words, they said the rights that were granted to us under Islam. So kind of co-opting the Taliban's obvious messaging. I think the situation, nobody really knows what's going to happen right now. Obviously, the Taliban are trying to convince people that they've changed and that, they went on this interview with a female anchor and said, yes, women can have education. But the Taliban have always lied about what they were going to do. They would declare ceasefires for Eid or Ramadan and then blow up schools with 80 children dead in one bombing. They would make promises about education for girls and then say, no, you can't study math, science, language. You can only learn how to sew. So all of these promises for me as an Afghan American who has been watching the Taliban since 1996 and engaged in this kind of Afghan advocacy ring hollow, and I don't trust them for anything.
So what do you guys think about the nature of the deal that was struck with the Taliban government, possibly by the United States then, under the Trump administration and certainly executed under the Biden administration overall? Was there an alternative way out of this situation in your minds?
Yeah, absolutely. I think so. Yeah. And I think, Biden came out, I think it was yesterday. I'm losing a little bit of track of time on what day of the week it is over here, but I think Biden spoke yesterday and he was talking about, it felt a little bit like victim blaming, saying the Afghan politicians and Afghan leaders and Afghan people weren't able to stand up to the Taliban, and we did our best, and like they just didn't want to fight, and like felt like victim blaming. And I think some of the roots of what went wrong in these past few weeks where the US supported government collapsed so quick was the fact that the US put in this this so-called peace deal, which was not a peace deal at all. It cut out the Afghan people. Some of my work has been about advocating for women to be at that negotiating table. But what did the United States do? They cut out the Afghan government. They cut out Afghan women. They cut out civil society. And one of the effects, the deal essentially, if I really want to break it down and summarize it, is the U.S. would not do airstrikes on the Taliban, and the Taliban decided not to do suicide bombings in major cities. They continue to kill Afghans in other ways. They did like a huge wave of assassinations. They just didn't do any huge suicide bombings. And they also promised not to kill any Americans in the past 2 years. So that's the deal that the U.S. cut. That was like self-centered in their self-own interest, ensured that they could leave and I mean, I think you've been carefully watching the news. There's definitely no Americans that have died. You know, everybody who's been on the front lines, whether it's like Afghans falling off like military cargo planes because they are so desperate for safety. You know, like I saw a tweet from somebody that was like, you know, how unsafe is it on the ground that somebody thought being in the sky was safer? And so the U.S. the entire occupation, I think, was we can go back and every instance, to every school that was built, to every like piece of programming that the U.S. tried to do, so-called nation building in the past 20 years. But I can say that definitely the withdrawal was done in an absolutely horrific way, and Afghans are paying the price for that.
Yeah, absolutely. It wasn't a peace deal, right? Like we can't genuinely call it a peace deal. It was a deal for American withdrawal that sold out the Afghan people to the Taliban. The Americans wanted to wash their hands because the political will was no longer there. And, you know, I'll be real, Afghans in the diaspora and Afghans in the country didn't want an American presence there either anymore, but we called for a responsible exit that wouldn't further exacerbate the situation. And that's just simply not what President Biden did. President Biden, when he spoke last night, he gaslit us, he gaslit Americans, and said that this was the only way that it could have happened. It didn't have to happen this way. He flat out lied about the will in Afghanistan to resist the Taliban, and whether or not people were willing to put their lives on the line for Afghanistan. The passport offices across the country have been overwhelmed for the past months, if not year, of ordinary Afghans trying to get their passports so they could leave. And yet President Biden said, oh, Afghans didn't want to leave just until yesterday. That is offensive on its face. He said that, Afghans weren't willing to fight for the country. Go to Al Jazeera English right now, look at their interactive media section, go to the Brookings Institution and read their report. 70,000 Afghans have died. 70,000 Afghans in the Afghan National Forces and Afghan National Police have died since 2007 for Afghanistan. Right? And so why did we see people giving up when the Taliban came into the city? Because they knew the deck was stacked against them. For the past few years, the United States government sidelined and delegitimized the Afghan government and put out every single signal that there was no faith in Afghanistan. And these people, the soldiers, weren't even being paid regularly. And the United States announced their time and date of the withdrawal and said, good luck to everybody else. And so what were the soldiers supposed to do there? Fight a fight that wouldn't make sense? No, their parents too. They have children that they're worried about too. They need to get out and protect their families too. So this blaming of Afghans is disgusting.
Yeah, I mean, look,
it's insulting. It's so deeply insulting that what he did yesterday. I just want to emphasize that.
The training program that the United States spent $90 billion on was an abysmal failure by their own metric of success. They openly stated it. Part of the reason for why that was such a colossal fuck up was because it wasn't training exclusively to build a standing army. Even the American military members that were down there talked about how they wouldn't give like actual NATO gear to the Afghan security forces and instead gave them like old AK-47s, RPGs, things of that nature, because they knew that the weapons would end up in the hands of the Taliban inevitably. And that's precisely what happened. That's why you see like Humvees and, you see photos of like Taliban soldiers, militants, taking selfies next to Blackhawks and whatnot. And that was obviously a massive, colossal fuck up on behalf of the retreat that the United States was engaging in. But ultimately, you're saying that it was we're still in agreement that, of course, the United States military had to pull out, right? Like, yeah, it's a 20-year occupation. Their presence there was not a force for good. Their presence there was always a force for evil. Afghans were treated as collateral damage routinely. Specifically in 2018, 2019, under the Trump administration, that collateral damage narrative increased dramatically. We had the most civilian casualties under the Trump administration that were comparable to 2002 when the original invasion began. So obviously, this narrative that we hear from the media about how, like, oh, the American military should have stayed there, what the fuck, like, or this like civilizing force of imperialism narrative is just an old colonialist attitude, and it's bullshit, right? Like, I don't know if you guys agree with that or not. You do ultimately agree that like pulling out was a necessity.
Yeah, what I would say, you know, like I was 14 years old when 9/11 happened. It was I was in the 8th grade. And I moved to the U.S. in August of 2001. And I too, at some point, thought the U.S. was a force for good there, and the U.S. military presence was bringing.
Holy shit!
Yeah, we can unpack that later. But I too thought that at some point, because I was young and perhaps naive, and I hadn't read up and hadn't seen. And I hadn't read up enough about American history, and I think over the years we just saw what the U.S. presence did there. You know, like when a country, when a nation and a people are at like rock bottom, and you kind of brag about the accomplishments. You know, when there's no girls' schools open, and you brag that there were few open. Yeah, of course there's going to be progress, but at the end at the end of the day, I think especially in the last 10 years, you know, we saw that the U.S. presence in the country was just a radicalizing force, because the U.S. kept bombing the Taliban and kept killing as many people. But its presence alone, the fact that it was supporting and propping up an inept and corrupt government that was running fraudulent elections, that wasn't serving the need of the Afghan people, you know. And then I'm glad we're having this conversation. But you know, I mean, Afghanistan hasn't been in the news for over 20 years. When there's a suicide bombing somewhere, you know, we got it kind of attention, but we've never had the opportunity to talk about what's been going on. But especially in the past 10, 15 years, what has the U.S. been doing? Running abusive CIA run so-called strike squads that are known to be super abusive of the local populations. They're not beholden even to the Afghan government in any capacity. They're run by Langley, by the Central Intelligence Agency. And there was this like the war was also far away from the cities. Like all these reporters right now, they're in Kabul, they're in a major city, and I understand why they're there now. But the war was fought in the rural countryside very often, and they were targeting populations that nobody gave a shit about. And these people kept getting killed in drone strikes. And I think we kind of now see what that did also to the populations. I mean, nobody wants to live under occupation, but certainly people also saw the effects of the U.S. presence there. It just ended up getting people killed, and there was zero accountability of the Afghan government, zero accountability definitely of the U.S. military. And so here we are 20 years later, kind of like summarizing and putting it together. It's like, this is what U.S. empire does, even when it has flashes of like kind of showcasing to the world, like, look what we've done, look at all the accomplishments. Okay, 20 years of investing in that, what's happening now to end all those accomplishments? Gone overnight.
Yeah. Well, the accomplishments were not necessarily seen throughout the entirety of Afghanistan either, right? Because what the minor improvements to the quality of life and civil liberties offered to the Afghan women specifically was a product exclusively within Kabul and the Green Zone, whereas like the tribal, maybe I'm incorrect here, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but like from what I understand, the situation for, you know, southern tribal regions, or the situation for rural Afghan people was not all that different, but then also American occupation on top of it, or American warlords specifically, that they literally shipped into the country when the specific warlord in the region was not working alongside the Americans, and you know, would take their bags of cash, but then still give away positions to the Taliban, whether because they were sympathetic to the cause of the Taliban or because they were terrified of the Taliban. It doesn't matter. So the American involvement in the region outside of the Green Zone still seemed to be an overall force for evil. And even within the Green Zone, it was still, you know, the American military wasn't exactly, you know, saviors.
Yeah, so I spent a year working for an organization that studied the effectiveness of development projects in Afghanistan. I was in Kabul, but I did get to go to some provinces, and a lot of it was just kind of desk research. But we did find that there were significant increases in key human development indicators like maternal mortality, access to primary care physicians, the enrollment of women and girls in schools did increase by the millions. Those things happened. There is an entire generation of young Afghans who have gone to school, become literate, and have access to everything that the internet offers, like Twitch, YouTube, Wikipedia, whatever. And when you go to Kabul, when I went to Kabul and I met some of those Afghans who grew up there and never spent a day outside of Kabul, much less the country, they spoke English with more of an American accent than I did. And they knew how to do everything, like from skateboarding to repairing like a motorcycle. And I'd be like, how'd you do that? And they said, oh, YouTube, right? Like these people, there's no going back. And part of that, we have to be nuanced, is because they had access to these things, but that doesn't take away the incredible amounts of harm that happen under the mismanaged and callous presence of the United States in Afghanistan.
So what do you guys think about like how do you feel about a way out of this situation? Do you feel like the Taliban government is going to maintain power? Do you feel like they're going to renege on the original promises that they're making currently, as they have done many, many times over with respect to women's rights, women's liberties? Obviously, they're already their starting point already is that, like, I remember hearing a Taliban speaker yesterday or this morning talk about how they would allow adult women to be in the presence of adult men, like news anchors and whatnot, in specific instances, but then they still have to wear not a burqa, but a niqab, face covering, and also even gloves. And there are a lot of little tweaks that they're making to their messaging from the start, right? But will there ever be momentum, like a counterbalance to the incredibly regressive Pashtun-backed Taliban government that will be oppressive towards the people of Afghanistan? Is there even any sort of momentum? Like, or did they all get squashed in the counter-revolutionary movement that America originally backed years before the USSR invasion, even?
Right.
Where all of the socialist momentum was like completely fucking ripped away and destroyed. Like, is there anything of the like in Afghanistan at this moment, or no?
I think, like Bilal mentioned kind of like the accomplishments and amazing things. Like, I went back in the winter of 2019, and I was just like so impressed. And some of that was my own being like walking into a place that I'd never been before and being extremely naive. And so like I think a lot of people in our community, and including Bilal and myself, were like disheartened and very like distraught and like perhaps extremely disappointed, because we were seeing the things that we saw, the dreams and aspirations of all these people kind of like just literally being kind of taken away. And people think this is the end game, and I kind of refuse to believe that. I think I have this optimistic belief in the fact that yes, the government, and so like I would say, so some of the promises that they made, I think, is like to try to look good to the international community and get like some continue to get like some type of aid flowing into the country. I think they saw, for example, how much money their leaders are seeing, how much money came into that country. They were like, that's an opportunity for us to be corrupt too. I really do think that they see that as an opportunity, and so they want to kind of play nice and show to the world, hey, this is what we believe in and we've changed. but I would kind of liken it to like an abusive relationship. You know, the guy is saying, "Hey man, hey guys, like this time I changed. Give me one more chance." But in the end, and especially behind closed doors, and that's kind of the messages me and Bilal, I think, are getting from folks, that it's like, hey, yeah, this is what they said at the press conference. This is what they said in front of the camera. And like, this is really what's happening. We're hearing some like troubling stuff that is not really matching their narrative, and it's probably going to play out. But I have like this like ending belief in the Afghan people. They're just like, they have so much tremendous potential, and they have dreams and aspirations, and they're not gonna, they're you know, like they've seen what they can do in the past like 20 years or so, and even honestly before that, and like folks who grew up in the 70s and 60s before that. I think there's a large motivational factor at play, and they're gonna, people are gonna fight back, you know.
Yeah. I think, I said it at the beginning, I don't trust any of their promises. And Arash is spot on when he says that they want legitimacy. They want to be recognized as legitimate government of the country. And so they will do whatever it takes, in terms of kind of whitewashing the veneer of legitimacy. Maybe they'll allow women in some circumstances to be in public. Wow, thank you. But the Taliban is decentralized. What happens with the, what the leader says in Kabul is going to be very different to what the Taliban uneducated fighters do in the provinces when they see a woman going to try to feed her family or try to get an education. There will be beatings, stonings, and killings. I guarantee it, because that hasn't changed. And Arash is also right that, like, regardless, you talked about the resistance among Afghans, that we've been doing that since 1975, and we'll keep doing it, right, until every single Afghan is free. And we just need the rest of the world to just kind of fucking stay out of it for a while. Like, you can support us with the aid that we need to keep our schools running and things like that, but stay out of the politics, because no foreign player in Afghanistan, China, Pakistan, India, United States, European Union, none of them have done anything tangibly positive in terms of shaping foreign policy. They've all made a mess out of it. The way forward for Afghanistan now is we need people to let in our refugees, open doors, absolutely let them in because their lives are in danger. And then we need people to keep a close eye to make sure that those red lines of human rights are intact through whatever methods are available, outside of more military intervention.
Okay, what do you feel about so what do you feel about America, India, China, and Russia and other regional powers that have an interest in, like, the Afghan resources that are ripe for extraction? What do you think about them potentially striking deals with the Taliban in a similar capacity to how imperial forces routinely overlook crimes against the citizens of populations, like in Saudi Arabia, for example, or the destruction of civil liberties, and even complete genocide, like in Yemen? Do you fear as though like we are going to do the same thing in Afghanistan and just see the Taliban as the de facto government of Afghanistan, exclusively so that we can, set up the infrastructure and freely take the minerals out of Afghanistan and develop it in key facilities that then the Taliban-run government will be beholden to us and our facilities and our technical knowledge? Like, I feel like this is the motivating principle behind why the American and imperial forces basically struck a bargain with the Taliban government to say, hey, we're never going to be able to, we know that the Afghan government, the puppet government that we installed that's corrupt on its own, is never going to be able to withstand the Taliban army. which has grown only in number and influence, especially in like the southern regions or tribal areas, rural areas, in recent years. So we will benefit from that stability that the Taliban will offer us as imperial forces that want to come in and take some of the natural resources that are ripe for extraction. Like, do you feel as though that was the bargain that was struck, and that's probably what's going to happen, and that's part of the reason why the Taliban government is now doing this PR, like almost liberal focusing PR in the best way they possibly can?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I think the U.S. and Taliban can be partners. They've proven that over the past 2 years, right? Like, there's that picture of Pompeo and whoever is the person in charge of the Taliban, like meeting in Doha. And so, I think
the person that they actually got out of prison, Trump and Pompeo negotiated to get that mullah, I forget his name, out of prison. He was in prison for 8 years.
Gitmo, I think.
No, I don't think he was in Gitmo. There was another one, Barabar. Yeah, Mullah Barabar, I think. But
Baradar, Mullah Baradar. He was in prison, and the leader of the Taliban, and the recognized leader of the Taliban, and Trump negotiated his release. That's what I was talking about earlier when I said the United States government has been doing everything it can to delegitimize and sideline what was, the Afghan government, as corrupt as it was. Everything was stacked into the Taliban's favor. And you're right, Hasan, like there's $1.3 trillion worth of mineral wealth in the country. We know that mineral wealth does not make developing countries rich. All of that money goes outside. And so there's a lot of money to be had by, as you rightfully call them, imperialist powers in Afghanistan. And there's no more political will to do any kind of nation building or even just like minimal support for civil society. And so the United States wants to wash its hands and, without any concern for the humanitarian crisis that it's causing.
Yeah. I feel like they just made this bargain that, of course, completely fucks over the Afghan people and their will, especially those that live in cities that are less conservative in general. Those are those that want to offer civil liberties to everyone. Those people get the shitty end of the bargain regardless. But I guess my question is, beyond immediately offering asylum to all those who want it, which we're completely on board. I mean, we're completely in support of, and I've talked about this before, which probably won't happen because of domestic politics. Very scary to see a bunch of Afghan people coming into the country. I mean, Macron recently, yesterday Macron talked about how we're going to prevent a migrant surge, like an uncontrolled migrant surge from coming into Europe and France specifically. So there's still that same level of treating all Afghan citizens as though they are, barbarians and not real human beings, like full-blown human beings. It's like Orientalist perspective that they still have. So, outside of that, though, I guess the question I have is, how do we achieve any sort of progress in Afghanistan? Like, how? Is there any way to do so? Because we are in agreement that the invasion and the occupation is bad overall, and that it's good that that the American forces are pulling out of Afghanistan ultimately. But how will the people of Afghanistan be able to revolt against the oppressive Taliban government?
The way I would frame it, first of all, let's first and foremost look back at the past 20 years, and actually also look 1979 to 1989. So both proxy war and a military invasion and occupation and so-called nation building. I call it just empire. I call it imperialism. I call it neo-colonialism. However we want to frame it. That doesn't work, obviously, right? So let's put that argument aside. And then secondly, after the past 42 years, right? And to put it into context, I'm 33 years old. the conflict is about at least 9 years older than me. And now I think the US and the international community, but we're from America, so let's focus on that for a little bit. The US owes the Afghan people reparations, and that seems like, I think, like such a far-fetched idea, but it's not. Governments have done that for populations where they've meddled, where they've interfered. Just the US has never done that. It owes black folks in this country reparations, native folks as well, the indigenous population. And now it owes that to Iraqis probably and Afghan people as well. And so and reparations can look in a variety of different ways, but the Afghan people are going to live under some kind of like repressive and authoritarian rule, and they will be a huge refugee wave. And so like what it owes at the very least at its basic core is it owes people safe haven, refuge, and probably like resettlement money, and that's where we can start to have this conversation. And that's, I think, the start of this conversation in terms of what Afghan people, which will include refugees now, what they are owed.
Yeah. and outside of just refugees, like making sure that education is a red line, that any Afghan who wants access to education must be able to get that education. And so whether that is through diplomacy or kind of trade incentives or whatever tool there is to make sure that those Afghans have that education they need. Like I said, the kids that grew up in Afghanistan for the past 20 years are not going to go back, right? You can't take someone's knowledge away from them. You can't take away everything that they've learned and the world that they've seen. And so I have faith that that generation is gonna pull through.
Yeah. Also, there's the secondary problem of like, okay, first and foremost, reparations or aid in most cases are used as a political tool by the State Department to uplift and perhaps even create insurgency movements if we're talking U.S. aid, right? But from what I understand, at least historically speaking, the United States is never going to align themselves with like actual revolutionary Marxist organizations, unless they are, unless they're like the YPG, which they can just like cast aside immediately in the aftermath of their use, like once they're no longer useful for them, right? So there's that problem. And the second problem is like aid will then exclusively go to the Taliban and will not necessarily be distributed evenly. So there's a lot of issues there logistically with respect to how this kind of aid can be delivered to the people of Afghanistan who desperately need it and deserve it. So I'm worried about that as well. What do you guys think about potentially like the Taliban collaborating with other regional leaders like Russia and China and offer them mining contracts and probably even pin them against U.S. interests? And it'll probably still bind. It will absolutely still bind Afghanistan to other superpowers around the world. But is there any way? Like, is that a way out of this situation?
No, you're absolutely right. Like, first of all, Afghanistan is, or the Taliban is, collaborating with a regional power right now, and that's Pakistan, right? Like, they get their leadership, their funding, their instructions from Pakistan's intelligence agency. That is a historic fact that, is documented. And so Pakistan has an incredible interest in making sure that Afghanistan is its client state. It's a nuclear power, and it has a vendetta against India. So anytime that there's some kind of diplomacy between Afghanistan and India, you see Pakistan retaliate. In terms of other superpowers, China, Russia, China has a major contract for copper mines in Afghanistan. In actually just, I think, like an hour north of Kabul, there's Mesainak, a historic archaeological site where it's probably one of the oldest Buddhist sites of major cultural and historical significance that is going to be destroyed if the Chinese contract goes through. It hasn't, they set up the dorms and other equipment for the Chinese workers to come in for extraction, but stopped because of security. And so those archaeological sites are not in danger right now. And that wealth is still in the ground. But I think once the Taliban sign off on collaborating with China, that is going to flow right out of Afghanistan and directly into China.
So it seems like there is a unilateral relationship with the Afghan government, which is now the Taliban Afghan government, amongst other like superpowers around the world, with because they all have a similar interest in mineral mining. That is, you know, whether it be lithium to the tune of $1 trillion, if I'm not mistaken, or even other kinds of minerals that are important for developing smartphones and laptops and things of that nature. So it feels like all of these other, you know, superpowers are exclusively interested in you know, plowing the land as best as they possibly can. And Taliban in the short term is the best way to offer them stability because of the way that they're backed by the Pakistani intelligence, and also because they are significantly stronger as a military force than what we have seen is the Afghan security forces and the corrupt Afghan government to begin with very little interest in like truly defending and trying to create stability in the region for themselves.
Yeah, I think the problem inherently becomes like due to U.S. intervention and then like this sudden withdrawal and then the entire process of it all, it emboldens the worst people in Afghanistan, like implicitly and explicitly. And then guess what happens? It's like there's forces within the country that like align themselves immediately with other global powers and neighbors. Like Iran has like no interest in just like the US and Pakistan and Russia, they do not serve the interests of the Afghan people. Also, though these regional powers will align themselves with powerful actors within our country, and for the Taliban right now, that's Pakistan, and that eventually will slowly lead to like some type of exploitation, unfortunately. And I'm sure we'll see that play out. We're in the beginning phases of that here, unfortunately. And then we can kind of trace that back to the past 42 years, specifically the past 20. But honestly, I think the history starts in like Bilal said, 1975, unfortunately. And so we have to kind of like, let's just be honest about what U.S. policy and how long for how long. You know, it's not just 20 years.
And even further back by how the British drew our borders, right? Like the British took away major cities from Afghanistan that had historically been the home of Afghans and gave them to Pakistan. The British drew our borders so that we would have a tiny sliver reaching China that separated Russia and India, if I'm not mistaken. And so all of those things were intentional, and it's the result is Afghanistan is now a landlocked country where its people are divided by borders that don't make sense, and we're at the heart of Asia, which is what people like to call Afghanistan, but really we're just kind of a playing ground for other people's proxy wars.
What do you think about like this is a question that my chat asked me before as well, like balkanization of Afghanistan? Do you think that would be a worthwhile endeavor, or is that a cause for concern and would make it significantly harder, would make the lives of the people living in, more urban environments worse overall.
Yeah, I would say that's like Biden once had that plan for Iraq. He was like, let's divide it up in 3 parts and divide them up by like the Kurds, the Sunnis, and the Shias. And like that's just such problematic thinking, I think. You know, especially like America is like uniquely diverse. Like I grew up in Western Europe. Like America is just uniquely diverse in a way that's kind of special. And then America goes to these like countries in the Middle East and Central Asia and says, oh yeah, actually the way to solve this is to divide these people, and like as if that's, and actually I think what we've seen in the past few years is like that the ethnic and religious divides in Afghanistan don't really matter until like an external player tries to play it up, you know? So the US spent like empowering and arming, and I don't know if folks saw like the videos of like these warlords just like living so lavishly. That's U.S. taxpayer money, not through USAID. That's through the CIA, and because the CIA specifically had a security interest. But these warlords are playing up, are not representative of their people, but they play up ethnic divisions because it's good local politics for them. And so like the U.S. has actually assisted the balkanization of a place like Afghanistan, when people just like actually don't really care deeply about that until somebody is like, oh, you know. And so I think we should just try to stay as far away as possible from that kind of idea. It's not the solution to things.
It's a really difficult question, because there are people in Afghanistan, people I know who are friends and very smart people, who say that, you know, the only way forward is for us to give the Pashtuns one land and, you know, the Tajiks or ethnic Persians a different land, you know, separate ways. But think about it. Afghanistan is a country the size of Texas, so relatively big. But those
pretty
populations,
big, 40 million. That's a lot of people.
But those populations are mixed. It isn't like there's one province with only Pashtuns and one province with only Tajiks. Yes, there are tendencies, but you couldn't mix that, or you couldn't separate anybody in a way that made any kind of practical sense. And I think if you created those different countries, you would just increase the tensions more, like we saw with South Sudan, right? I don't think that in my heart, as a patriotic Afghan American, you know, like, who cares about Afghanistan, I don't think that that's the way forward, but maybe that's naive of me.
Yeah. No, I was just asking, is this one way that people suggest, but oftentimes those lines are drawn by imperial forces, which is literally the cause for the problem to begin with. Ultimately, like the reason why Afghanistan is so diverse and seemingly unable to, or seemingly have competing interests within like different groups of individuals living in like different areas with different ethnic backgrounds, is literally a consequence, as you pointed out, of empire, you know, drawing up the lines in the most asinine way possible. So yeah, I mean, I just I wanted to hear from you guys about what your personal experiences are. What do you think about like mainstream media's war drum narrative so far, though? And the other thing I wanted to ask you is like, so ultimately, the reason for why we are in the situation to begin with in Afghanistan is a consequence of the American State Department galvanizing, emboldening, arming, and training the Mujahideen originally as a force to fight against the USSR, right? Mm-hmm. And then they became this incredibly powerful, fighting force that ultimately took control. And then we went back in and pushed them out as best as we could. And now we basically, I guess, gave the country back to the Taliban, some of those Mujahideen forces became the Taliban, what we know as the Taliban. also coordinating with the Pakistani intelligence alongside American intelligence. So America's like completely responsible for the situation at hand. But this is why I keep asking, like, is there a way out of this situation at all? Like, is there any way to is there any way for the Afghan people to push back against the inevitable oppressive Taliban government, especially if the Taliban government is now going to maintain stability as best as they can for their for the global superpowers that want to extract natural resources from Afghanistan?
Yeah, I do think like whatever happens next, people are really sick and tired of conflict. You know, I believe in like if there's a Nazi on the streets here in America, I don't necessarily believe in nonviolence. But to put it in context, in Afghanistan, it's just like violence has been so destructful, and there's been just so much misery. And so like I think there's a way to fight back. There's probably like a lot of like nonviolent means and constructive ways. And I'm not sure exactly what that's gonna look like, but people are gonna fight back. You know, like that's also kind of like the conversation I'm having with folks back there is like, yeah, like I'm scared, I'm petrified, I'm like a little bit nervous, but this is not the end, you know, like I'm processing these feelings. This is very sudden and very quick, but like this is not it. And also like a lot of folks, like we are advocating personally through our campaign for refugees to be taken in, because there's a lot of folks who are just under threat and at risk due to the US's actions. But there's plenty of folks who are also going to stay. You know, it's a country of 38 million people. We're not like nobody's advocating for like a complete emptying of Afghanistan, and that won't happen either. There's plenty of folks that will stay and fight and be constructive. I would say, but there are folks who need to get out. They need to be evacuated, right? Like the immediate need today, tomorrow, and like this weekend needs to be like the security of the airport and keeping it operational and like allowing the people that need to get out to get out. And then the next step is like, you know, waiving like visa requirements for Afghan nationals. It's like really hard to travel on an Afghan passport. I think most of your viewers here have American passports. There's an incredible privilege to that. You can pretty much go anywhere around the world and be like, okay, cool, you get a tourist visa. Like some of the places Afghans can go on an Afghan passport is like Haiti and places like Rwanda. And that's like, these are some of the things the US and the international community, what they can do is like just drop visa requirements and then, you know, offer them refuge, a safe haven, resettlement money. Those are the things people like the US can be constructive in.
Yeah. There's a lot of talent in the diaspora, and there's you know, just as much talent inside the country, and those people will find the way forward. But you know, Afghanistan's history is, you know, as a result of its geography and a result of kind of its geopolitical accidents of, you know, being next to Iran, Pakistan, China, and Russia, and they all have an interest in what's going to happen there. So it's tough. You know, I think people who are a lot smarter than us, who have studied the region for their whole lives, probably don't have an answer either.
You definitely do not foresee any way that the Taliban will allow for civil liberties to occur in a similar capacity to Afghan women and people that want to get educated and whatnot, though, right? Like, there's no shot that that's happening. I personally don't believe it, but I want to hear your perspective on it.
No, like, I'll give them two things. Like, they're being strategic right now, and it's good PR. But they are lying to the world. They're lying to their teeth. I mean, like, also, like, the messages we are getting, like, folks are petrified, and, like, the reporters are in Kabul. And a lot of my friends and some of my family is in Kabul. The countryside, like, Kabul is 6 million people. There's, like, roughly 38 million people. there's like 32 other million people, and like we're not hearing stories from there, and we're not hearing from the reporters there, and the Taliban kind of has like free reign. And so we're hearing, for example, in a city like Herat, women aren't allowed to go to school, and that's what they've been advocating for. You know, that's what they were like in the mid 90s, and that's what they spent 20 years fighting for. And so like I am deeply, deeply, deeply skeptical of these claims that they're doing in front of like the Western press. And I hope also like I want to believe them. I hope that's true, but it's not. And I think we should be like very like critical of them in the way we are here at home of the Biden administration. You know, we should be critical and skeptical. And if they prove me wrong, great. But until then, I don't believe it.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's unfortunately it's a very sad situation. I wanted to leave you guys off with like I don't know any parting words that can maybe offer people in Afghanistan if they're watching, people all around the world, like any sort of positive thinking here, like anything positive that could potentially happen in Afghanistan in the near future, or like ultimately, I guess the one thing that is changing is that outside of the oppressive Taliban government that has now taken over Afghanistan, at the very least, like American forces are pulling out. So I guess that's one slight progressive thing that's happening. I don't know. I mean, I feel like JSOC will still have full reign in the way that they want to.
Yeah.
Is there any silver lining here?
The silver lining is that, like I said, you can't take away the education of the millions of kids who have studied and been exposed to the outside world for the past 20 years. They are Afghanistan's future, and if we give them the tools to fight for their rights, I'm confident that they'll find a way to make the best out of the opportunities. And you said if we could give a message to the people listening, I'll say ما منعس افغانا در جامعه افغانا در خارج هرگز شما را فراموش نمی‌کنیم. We will always be with you. We are always thinking of you. You are our siblings. You are in our hearts, and there's not a day that I don't go to sleep thinking about how I can work to make sure that you're safe and that you're doing what you want to be doing. I'll be with you.
Yeah, and to second what Bilal said, obviously, I think for folks who are not Afghan and are trying to find ways to be constructive, like people do not thrive. Like real progress does not come from occupation and imperialism. It comes from like peace, stability, and when repression is overthrown. And whether it's the U.S. or Pakistan, whatever like foreign influence tries to control the Afghan people, that will fail because they failed in the past. But I think to folks who want to be useful, you know, we're on Instagram, we're on Twitter, Afghans for a Better Tomorrow. Currently, we are trying to get like prioritizing evacuations and advocating for an open door refugee policy. We need your help. You know, like there are a lot of folks like who are products of displacement and war and conflict, like me and Bilal, but who are awesome members of society, who are awesome and constructive members here in America or wherever we've grown up. And these people have dreams and aspirations. They deserve your support. And I think that's it.
What can people do to help? Like right now?
Right now we have a petition. I mean, like putting the pressure on the Biden administration specifically to kind of change course. Like they own this, you know, like they messed this up. Every president and every administration before this messed this up. Like Biden owns this at this moment, and he can kind of make it not fully right, but he can take a step in a positive direction. So we have a petition up. And we also, like, whatever pressure points folks can find, you know, whether it's your congressperson at this moment, we need a huge push. It's possible, but we need, like, all the people that are watching on this Twitch right now, and who are your fans, we need your help, you know, like every little bit helps, I think.
There's the petition, there's a draft email you can send to your member of Congress to push them to let in Afghans. That's what we need to do right now.
That's at weareafghans.org/take action, right? Hello?
Yes, that's it. We are Afghans.org.
All right, perfect. Well, once again, thanks a lot, guys, for coming on. And this was a wonderful experience. And I don't know what else to say. I'm sorry. It's a little, I mean, it's very disheartening, but I hope the situation will inevitably improve for the people of Afghanistan and the Afghans living in diaspora.
Thank you, Hasan. Thank you for having us.
All right.
Thanks for having us, man. We appreciate it.
All right. Bye, guys. All right, folks. That was that was something. Their Twitters, for those of you who want to know, is Billy Istan and at 87 Films. If you want to see their Twitters.